What is up, guys? It's Lost Griff. Welcome back to another video. Today's video just another lore spell updated tier list video. Now, a lot of you guys have been requesting the lore spell tier list, as well as just more tier lists in general. I've had a lot of positive feedback about tier lists, and I'm just really happy to make another one for you guys. And this will be including the spell limit paths of each of these spells, all of the ones that are added to the game. That will be including the ones that are dropped from other bosses, such as this one and this one. This is just gonna be the spells I'm gonna go over today. I might, if you guys have any ones that I didn't think of in the comments below, I will give my thoughts on those and my tier list on those and respond to each comment based on that. I always try to respond to every single comment I get from you guys. So make sure if you have a question or anything you want to drop down below, I'll make sure to check that out. So let's just start off easy and let's go with Angry Snow Pig. So this spell is pretty useless. I'm hovering between situational and generally useless, but I'm just going to stick towards useless. I genuinely can't think of a time I'd need this spell. Because if you think about it, right? Sure, it's really useful to steal a shield and then hit. But hitting and then stealing a shield is pretty useless. Like, I guess there could be two shields, or you could hit through a tower and do it, and then steal the other one. But with Rochambeau's in the game, this spell needs reworked so bad. It is so useless. It is just so bad. And, like, with Rochambeau's in the game, it's just not good. Like, there's no point in using it, and I just don't see a point where I'd ever want to use this spell. Alright, now, for the next spell, we have Brimstone Revenant. Now, I think this is a pretty strong spell. I don't think this is the best one. I might have to change this up, but I think this is probably top of pretty strong. This spell is honestly pretty good and makes Trap Stack Fire really strong. I think it's such a slept on spell in general. Like, I feel like more OT fires could use it actually, which, if it weren't for the new Meltdown update and stuff like that, I feel like I'd be packing some of these in my deck just because it does so much damage. Like, the damage per pip on top of the utility it gives is just super good, and I feel like this spell is really strong. And again, if enchants, if there was Epic still in this game that you could still pack in PvP, like if Epic was still in the game instead of Surge, this spell would be so OP. A no cap, it would be so good. All right, now Sacred Charge. I think this spell is okay. It's situational. It has some pretty good damage per pip for a life spell. I mean, it does 500 damage. It gives you a 250 absorb, which I mean is pretty good. You could use it to cover a tower shield or something. But overall, this spell unfortunately just falls a little bit short. Five pips is just not very good for a life spell. 5 pips in general is just a weaker kind of expectation for any sort of lore spell, because I feel like 5 pips just makes it a lot less usable since it's not as spammable. And lore spells are known to be spammable, and this one is just not. So yeah. Rampage, bottom of situational, I think. I think this spell on paper could be decent, but with shifts in the game and everything, I don't see why you'd ever want to use this. Sure, you could use the detonate spell in conjunction with it, but if you're playing as a fire, somebody's gonna expect you to OT, and ultimately that's just how the game's gonna turn out for you. I really don't see myself ever using this spell in PvP. The spell again has really good damage per pip. So I will give it that, but its mantle is just way too useless, and even though it does have some great damage per pip, Pierce Enchanting this would actually be kind of sick. It does a lot of damage. For not gonna lie, for a 5 pip spell, this does a lot, but unfortunately there's just no situation in which I could see myself using this. It's just the mantle is so useless, and I mean 700 damage is good and all, but just use a TC at this point, honestly. Just use a really OP 5 pip TC for Storm. Okay, so Catch of the Day is pretty strong. Nobody packs it nowadays, but I think it's a pretty above average spell. I think it's pretty good. Storm just has a lot more options right now in PvP, and unfortunately, Catch of the Day is not the top of the list anymore, but I do think the spell is slept on. I do think it's pretty good. In fact, I think I'd actually put it in the pretty strong area, because it generally is a really good spell. Nobody packs it for some reason, so it's quite unfortunate, but it is a great spell, and I think a lot of people should start using it. Deer Knight, unfortunately, since it is an AoE, it's not very good in PvP, but I would put it in the average tier just because it does do a lot of damage. It's a decent minion killer. The OT is pretty good, and I feel like if it weren't for Death's draining factor, this would be a great spell for them to pack. Look at Reindeer Knight, for example, how Ice used Reindeer Knight. This is still a great spell. It's a Ship of Fools exists, Scarecrow exists, Drains exist. There's just no point, in my opinion, so that's just how I feel about it. Goat Monk is actually not terrible, but I do feel like Goat Monk is just literally a worse version of Sacred Charge, therefore I put it in the generally useless tier. Sacred Charge is already a pretty bad spell, but this spell just really tops that. Right now, Headless, I think this is the number 1 or number 2 best lore spell in the game. It's super good. Damage per pip is crazy. Even though the spell limit path is not that great, it's still pretty insane. I think this spell is just actually just so good right now. I'm surprised that nothing's really happened to it yet, the normal version of it. It's a little bit too high for a death spell, and I do think it does need to get looked at. Okay, now, Grendel's Amends, I think middle is situational. Like, sure, it does a good amount for a myth heal, but like, now that masteries are so good in PvP, actually, I'd even put it lower than Burning Rampage. Now that masteries are so good in PvP, I just genuinely can't see a situation in which I'd heal on a myth, like using Grendel's Amends. Like, I'd just run Life Mastery at this point. You know what I mean? So even though, and on top of that, the fact that healing is already bad. So I'd argue bottom situational, maybe even top of generally useless. Just not a very good spell. And even whenever it's spellmented, unfortunately, it's still even not that good of a heal. Here up Thor. Now, if you can enchant this spell, it would be, honestly, in above average. But I think we're just going to let it settle top of average tier. I think it's a good counter to weaknesses and stuff like that. But unfortunately, even after you spellment it, it just doesn't do enough damage, and it definitely needs some help, I'm not gonna lie. 475 is pretty weak for a Storm spell, and even though the idea of removing a weakness is great for Storm, I do feel like it does need some love. But Maury, unfortunately, this spell is in the same situation as Catalan. Even when spellmented, it still just doesn't do enough damage, and I would say for that reason, it's probably bottom of average. The mantle just ended up being wasted utility, and I think they need to be removed from both of these spells in order to make them better. Maybe Catalan could do like 750 without Spellman, and this could do like maybe like what 510 to 545 or something like that. And I think that'd be pretty fair. You know what I mean? But unfortunately, that's not what's going to happen. They're going to stay this way, and the 25 mantle is just going to kind of end up being pretty useless. So, two spells that will stay at the bottom of average until they get changed. Keeper. Now this spell is going to be my first above average pick. I think it's a slightly, obviously, worse version than Brimstone. But fortunately, it works really well in conjunction with not only Trap Stack, but also a lot of other strategies for Myth. I think it's a slept on spell, and I think it honestly needs more attention. Same deal with Brim. Krampus is the same position. I would say it's top of above average. Spellmented is extremely good, and it's not hard to get spellmented either. A 55 mantle is just actually just cracked for fire. If you want to be, you know, a loser and RNG people to death, and honestly you can. This is the first spell I'll say is slept on but doesn't need more love. I hate Krampus. Even though it is a really sick spell, it's just too RNG based, dude. I hate mantle lore spells. Alright, Lord of Night. Since you can't use Solar Surge anymore or any sort of enchant, I think this spell's pretty bad. Maybe bottom, maybe middle of situational. It's just not very good. It's kind of like how even though Wraith is a great spell on its own, nobody uses Lord of Night because it's just, there's no point. Like, why even use Lord of Night when you have like every other drain, like Dumoni, you know, Dr. Von, stuff like that. So, no real point. Okay, so this is an old picture of the lore. It seems like this is a little bit outdated in terms of the pictures, but with how the new lore spell elements look, and whenever they get introduced into the game, I think it could genuinely be top of pretty strong, maybe even best. You guys might think, okay, well wait, those aren't out yet, but I would say right now I would rank lore top of situational, but until spell elements, or whenever spell elements come out, which is probably going to be pretty soon, I think this spell is going to be broken if somebody takes the time to farm it. This spell is going to be just as good as Loom. If you guys look at the paths on it, it's super strong, and it fits perfectly a spell like Balance, or a spell on a school like Balance. Okay, and that brings up the conversation. What about Luminous Weaver? Luminous Weaver, in my opinion, is tied with Headless for best lore spell in the game. I think it's so good just because Life has no other good spells, so I would say it's maybe second best, just because Headless, you know, just does a lot more damage, and overall, just super complementary to the Death School. But I think if Life had better spells, they wouldn't really even need Loom. It's just so good because of how weaknesses interact in the game right now. So, yeah, that's where I'd put Loom. Okay, so the next spell up is Ninja Piglets. Now, this spell is actually pretty good. I think Spellmented, it's actually kind of solid and fits the lore, you know, spells pretty well. So, actually, I think just because Balance has Mana Burn and other good spells, I think this bottom up pretty strong. Maybe even top of above average. This Spellmented is actually kind of cracked. It does a lot of damage. And unfortunately, nobody really has the max Spellments because, I mean, nobody wants to farm that shit. But honestly, at max, it's pretty good. And I think if somebody actually used it, it actually could be pretty viable. Ninja Pigs. Now, there's a problem with this spell, right? Because if Athena wasn't in the game, this spell would be so broken. Just so broken, because it literally does almost as much damage as Catalan, right? And it's just so good for a myth spell. It does 640, and that's just a lot of damage. But ever since Surge and Epic got removed from the game, in PvP. I just don't think it's very viable to use in PvP right now, so I would say it's bottom of above average, but it's just, whenever there's Athena in the game, there's just no point to use a spell like this. You know, Pigsy, obviously no one's going to use this in 1v1, so we're just going to put it in generally useless. Even though it does have an insane, healing per pip, it's just not that good. Ratatosker. This spell's actually kind of slept on. I mean, if it weren't for life wand hits, I feel like everybody would pack a few of these just because of how much damage it does and how good it is in general for killing minions. But since everybody has life wand hits with Mercy Wand, in this current meta I would put it about situational. It's just not very good, and nobody really needs an AoE like this whenever you're doing, whenever you're playing a school like Life, because you can just loom the minion anyway and pretty much get the same value. Okay, Reindeer Knight. This spell is pretty cracked. Pretty cracked. I think this spell is still so packable because not only does it create a damage right up front, but it also creates a damage over time to your opponent, which is just so good on a school like Ice, who always needs overtimes to pressure their opponents. Having a Reindeer Knight and a Frostbite in hand to deal with shields, and not only shields but also minions, makes them a very versatile school and able to handle minion spamming in order to get rid of shields. But overall, pretty good spell, and I'd say pop it pretty strong. Okay, now Samurai. This spell is also pretty decent, but whenever it burns in the game, you're never going to see somebody use this spell. But fortunately, the spell-mented version of it is actually not too bad. It's a pretty interesting utility. You hit your opponent, and both of you guys gain 1 pip, which is quite interesting. I don't know what sort of context you could use this in. Maybe if you were comboing and they were at low pips, and you kind of wanted to just shut them out with a certain, Samurai into burn combo or something. I don't even know. You could even use some sort of way to increase their pips, so you can increase the burn damage or something like that. Some sort of crazy, idea could be, thought up with this spell. But overall, kind of just gets overshined by another spell I'll mention later. We'll say middle of average, just because it is a pretty good spell in my opinion, and overall has a pretty unique utility. Speaking of spells that are better than Samurai, Savage Paw is a pretty above average spell. I think it's pretty good. And I actually think it could take over the Ninja Piglet spot, because I do think that Savage Paw, in certain scenarios, could be a really, really, really good offensive option for balanced wizards, and continually has always kind of climbed up the ladder more and more as the meta goes on, or as more metas go on, I guess, because, you can carry a TC of this, and just have a pretty good chance of winning the mirror matchup, because you kind of pressure them to either weakness you or shield, which gives you a free open chat. So, pretty good spell, and I enjoy using it. Okay, Mr. Moon is also a pretty strong spell. I would say it is right around the area that Brim is. It creates this pressure where you have to sunblock against an ice so they can't get an open shad. Therefore, creating a stun combo is obviously a no-brainer, a really good spell to have on a school like Ice, and it is still packable on Ice as well. So even though you can't enchant it, it's still really good, and does a pretty good amount of damage for a hit and stun spell, so pretty good. Okay, I'm going to be addressing these last few spells I did not get to address, unfortunately, because of the tier list limits. Now, I will be putting them in individually. Now, let's go list them off. So, Hephaestus, I would say, is at top of pretty strong, if not bottom of best. It is the best hit and bubble in the game still. It does way too much in the TC form, and it's just overall an insane spell. Celestial Intervention is okay, but since there's so many shield gamuts that revolve around Ice, I really do feel like there's no point in running a spell like this on Ice. So, therefore, I would say top of situational. Berry Surprise is actually a really, really good spell. Hate me for it, I don't care. Berry Surprise does so much damage and heals so much at max tier. It's actually cracked. I genuinely think this spell with like Galvanic could be so spammable, and actually I think people, if they get the max tier of it, should try a strategy with it. I think this is a slept on spell. I think it could be bottom of pretty strong, if not top of pretty above average. I'd like to see somebody form up a strategy with this thing, so yeah, let me know what you think. And then Calypso, I would say, is about the same area as Berry Surprise. I do think that maybe Berry Surprise could be on the same level, so I would probably put them in the same spot as well. Can't Bandit, I've heard a lot of bad about this spell, and I really don't even understand what it does to its full extent. Maybe maybe middle of situational, just because I don't really think anybody could make any value out of the spell. Splash Squatch is in the same situation as Ninja Piglets. It's spammable and all, it's pretty good, but overall I can't really see a time where you'd use it. So, I mean, maybe it's about middle of above average with Ninja Piglets. Athena, I also think this is in the best tier. These are the 5 best spells, lore spells in the game. I think that Headless, Luminous, the new LOREMASTER, Hephaestus, and Athena are the 5 best lore spells in the game, simply because they're so packable and so spammable, and actually just really strong. You just fit their School's identity so much. Ship of Fools is actually a pretty strong spell, and again, it is actually a pretty good minion killer if you want to pack them, but unfortunately no one really minions against death like that, so I would say top of above average until someone starts minioning more often against that school. Now the final spell that I will be putting in here is the Spiritual Tribunal spell. Now it is cool that you can spell-element it, but overall Spectral Blast is just way better. I really do feel like Spectral Blast is good because you can break shields with it and use it to set up for your Hydra. Unfortunately, no one really packs Spectral Blast right now, but I think it has a lot of potential. So, since it's just a worse version of Spiritual Tribunal, and because you probably want to just use Ninja Plaguelets anyway if you were going to use a 4-pip hit, I would put it probably in the bottom of above average, if not average tier. And that's it for me today, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed today's tier list. Now, if you guys want more PvE style stuff instead of PvP style tier list, let me know. I just kind of want to try another one of these PvP tier lists because the Rochambeau tier list did not do as good as I hoped it would do. But thank you guys so much for all the support recently. I appreciate all the subs and likes on the recent videos. And thank you guys just so much overall for the recent support. Just once again, I just really wanted to thank you guys. Hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and peace out.
Bye.